Okay, welcome everybody back to the Downtown Den for a session with not one, not two, but three local enterprise partnership chairs this morning. Delighted for our 100th webinar session since lockdown. Yes, a century of video recordings we are celebrating today, and we couldn't have chosen a more eminent panel to help us do so. We've Roger Marsh, who is the chair of the Leeds City Region Local Enterprise Partnership, but also chairs the Strategic MP11, which he'll tell us a little about in a second. We have Clare Hayward, and Clare is the chair of the Cheshire Warrington LEP, and Steve Fogg, who is chair of the Lancashire LEP. Good morning to you all.
Good morning.
It's great to see you, and thanks for joining us at what is, I think, a bit of a crossroads for the economy now. We've had the summer statement last week from Chancellor Rishi Sunak. We're starting to see, I think, a change, a movement in the dial, Roger, as far as the messaging is concerned. So the Prime Minister certainly is talking about go back to the office if you can, rather than work from home if you can. And I'm anticipating that as we lead up to September and fingers, toes and everything else crossed, we get the schools to return, we're going to hopefully see a bit of a more normality into our lives. But listen, local enterprise partnerships are going to have a huge role to play in respect of implementing some of these plans that the government are wanting to deliver in the coming months and years. So what's your take on where the economy is at the moment, and what would you hope to see happen through the rest of the summer?
Thank you, Frank, and good morning, everybody. And it's great to be joined by my colleagues, Claire and Steve, as part of the wider NP11 group. I guess we've got to, I suppose, strike a balance of optimism with realism. And we need to just remind ourselves just how far the economy unfortunately has fallen. And in broad terms, as we speak, it's probably no bigger than it was in 2010. But with all of the interventions, most recent of which, national debt has probably about doubled in the same period. So that's quite a big challenge. And we also need to make sure that we try and do things that are realistic and also planned and importantly focused. And I think, and you'll hear from my other colleagues, that whilst in an ideal world nobody wants to see business failures, nobody wants to see an increase in unemployment at whatever age or stage people are in life. Sadly, that's not reality. We have to then deal with reality and have the interventions that will minimise the impacts, not just flatten it down, but actually minimise the impacts, but also create new opportunities for people. And I characterise, in terms of when I think about Leeds City Region in particular, and others will speak about their own geographies, around recovery having kind of three components: rescuing what we've got today, using the opportunity to reimagine the future, and the opportunities for those who may find themselves out of work, but perhaps have had a good idea and never really given themselves a chance to see whether it could be something that could be in a few years' time a global leading business. And the third piece, so that's the reimagining piece, and the third piece I think is, how do we try and put some resilience into this, and assuming things like this are going to come around the corner again, hopefully not too soon, and I think it's important that we do so. I think whilst we're all, and you'll hear us say from Steve and Claire shortly, looking at our geographies from a bottom up, at what can we do locally, we as NP11 are trying to look top down and say, okay, what are the things we could do at a northern level where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts? And I think with great respect to policymakers and people right at the heart of government, I'm not sure that I've seen much narrative of what a successful economy could look like in 2025, say 5 years from now. And what were those stages nationally of rescue, reimagine, and resilience? Maybe we'll begin to see that as we grapple with the rescue and the re-emergence from economic hibernation. when we get to the autumn statement. And I hope me and my colleagues, together with the mayors and the other local authority people, in that true private-public sector partnership, will shape that northern agenda for national benefit. And certainly we're up for it. Politics don't play a part in here. This is the equilateral triangle of economic, social, and environmental considerations that we need to make sure we get right and don't necessarily have it lopsided or something missing. Perhaps that's a helpful segue to the detail my other colleagues might want to fill in, Frank.
Thanks, Roger. Some great points that you've made there. And I particularly wanted to pick up with you, Clare, on the observation Roger's made about the government perhaps not mapping out a future for our economy. And I suppose in defence of Rishi Sunak, he's trying to protect what he can at the moment, isn't he? I think he's prioritised protecting jobs, protecting businesses where he can, things like the furlough scheme, the loan schemes that he's introduced for business and so on. But as Roger has rightly said there, we do need to start to turn our attention, I think, sooner rather than later, to the what next question. And so what are the sort of thoughts that you're having at the moment, Clare, given what we've experienced over the last few months, what your expectations are for the remainder of 2020?
Yeah, I think Roger flagged some really important points regarding ensuring that we're taking into consideration both the economic, the social, and also making sure that we have the clean sustainability elements taken into consideration as well. Because as you say, at the moment, we're very focused on making sure that we're protecting. And that has been a very important part of ensuring that we're building in resilience. However, many are also concerned that we may be masking what's happening within the economy at the moment. Certainly as we come to the end of furlough, that we may start to see that those businesses that haven't been able to reimagine or be as resilient are going to disappear. However, I think what we're also going to see is those organisations that have taken this as an opportunity. There are those that have recognised the importance of accelerating that digitisation across their businesses, or the need to rethink their working practices, or the opportunity to rethink how they are currently managing their supply chain, or rethink how they are working with their global teams. Rethink, and actually that rethinking and reimagining is actually a really critical part of us making sure that what we build is a future vision for not only the UK, but the North and also our individual regions. And one of the critical things I think we need to be focused on is that combination of making sure that we've understood our region and our locality so that we know we can build on our assets, whilst also being very confident and thinking about what is it that we can bring as the UK in this global market. Because I'm sure that everybody has on their mind not only the output of COVID, but we've also got Brexit coming around the corner in a few months' time. And for a number of the organisations we're talking to, it's a combination of those two things that we really need to be focusing going forward. So we need a confident vision for both the UK and for the North to make sure that we step up to that, build on our assets, and make sure that we are reimagining our future, but in a very confident and reassuring fashion so business can get back to business.
Thanks, Clare. Steve, good morning to you.
Good morning.
It's always great to see somebody from sunny Lancashire on the call. My old haunting ground, of course. Can I just say, Steve, I want to try and keep the conversation as positive as we can this morning. We see enough gloom and doom around, and I'll turn my attention later to some of the reports in the media this morning, which I think are outrageous in terms of talk about trying to get people to just go back to bed and put their head under the covers. But as I say, maybe we'll talk about that a bit later on. But Steve, you know, it would be remiss if I wasn't to mention the fact that Lancashire has had some big knocks over the last couple of weeks with announcements around the aerospace industry, which of course is hugely important to the county. And then as with Leeds and Cheshire as well, of course, the hospitality sector, the visitor economy is such an important pillar of what we do in the county. So what's the Lancashire LEPs feeling at the moment? Are we taking any measures to address and tackle those clear and present dangers, really, that have been presented to us?
Yeah, thank you, Frank. Yes, we are. Both, as you say, have been a big impact in Lancashire. And I can't stress enough, if you look at tourism, hospitality and the aerospace sector, they're also a heritage of Lancashire going back many, many, many years. And therefore, they're a big bedrock of the economy. Tourism, what have we done there? Well, prior to COVID, of course, we'd set up a new strategy for Lancashire, which was made up of core sector pillars where we would drive growth and drive the future from. And tourism is clearly, and hospitality was one of those, and manufacturing, and specifically a subsector, which is probably the largest, the aerospace sector, was also one of those. So luckily, we had started to pull solid business people together to start to imagine the future, as Claire describes it. So we already had a good footprint of people there. When COVID hit, of course, it decimated tourism, shut the doors basically. And as you know as well as I do, tourism is built on footfall. And if you can't get footfall through it, then you don't have it. So we brought together a group of businesses led by Kate Shane from Merlin. And what they are doing is currently trying to reimagine all the issues, all the solutions, and a future for tourism. I think it's worth recognising that from a tourism perspective and a hospitality perspective, we're not in reimagining to some extent, we're in survival in some of these businesses, and they are fighting for survival. And some of them that have had good balance sheets, good business plans, are surviving and being able to get through. Others that, you know, frankly, they're small businesses relatively. If they're just invested in that business, they don't have a strong balance sheet because they've looked at recovery going forwards, and they've been really, really badly impacted. And we've seen some big businesses close in Lancashire. So that's our approach there, Frank. In the aerospace sector, which frankly has been hit from Rolls-Royce, Safran nacelles, Airbus have just announced a whole set of redundancies. You know, this could be massive for Lancashire. But the really good thing is I've managed to pull together a small task force for Lancashire, which is made up of, again, the big businesses across Lancashire and the supply chain. So we've got the likes of BAE there, we've got Safran nacelle in it, and we've got Rolls-Royce in it, and we've got the supply chain that works across Lancashire that frankly will be the most impacted by it. And I think we forget sometimes that the big announcements that come in, say from Rolls-Royce, they wash through a supply chain across Lancashire, and we don't talk about that enough, frankly. So what are we doing there? We've got two groups going at the minute. We've got a business group going, which is starting to understand the real asks that we need of government. So, you know, things like reinvesting in defence, bringing defence programmes forward, reinvesting in engineering and science more broadly, such that we can transfer the skills to other businesses, has been a real ask for us. Putting matching solutions in for young people. So how do we make sure that young people don't become the biggest impact here? So apprenticeships lost, graduate programs lost. So how do we actually bring those together and try and work across other businesses to sweep people up who might be impacted because of this? And I know BAE, my old business, frankly, have already contacted me and said, Steve, if we can help in any way, if we can reach out to businesses, we're really keen to do that. And they're not on their own, you know, other big businesses are doing the same thing. So I'm really pleased at that. The other group around the aerospace sector, I was pleased to join a cross-party MPs group with the trade unions to start to look at, well, you know, what can we do from an aerospace point of view? And what are the indicators? And I had the opportunity to present to them some of the impacts that we're seeing across Lancashire. And if we don't do something shortly, there is a very positive intervention that's not just tactical, which is what we've seen to date, that's actually strategic, sustainable, and can maintain the engineering and science and technology sectors for the right purpose. We've started some of those dialogues, and so you can imagine we fear this greatly in Lancashire because the aerospace sector and hospitality is our heritage, if nothing else. I mean, how many people went to Blackpool, in their childhood? But we've got to do something, and it can't just be tactical, Frank. So that's what we're trying to work on.
Yeah.
I think that's a key point, Steve, and a good one as well in terms of the government acting in a tactical fashion at this moment in time. I think a point that you were making, Roger, we need a bit more strategy moving forward. And the other thing that struck me when Rishi Sunak made his announcement last week was some really good stuff in there. But the question I kept coming back to was, who's going to deliver? Where is the delivery process and mechanism? And this, sorry to put this on you guys, but this is where local enterprise partnerships, in my view, are going to earn the core, because you do have direct line into government. You've got relationships with local authorities, combined authorities where they exist. And this is where I think we've got to start getting into the detail of, okay, all this money is out there. How do we begin to deliver? And again, Roger, if I can come to you, are those engagements happening now? Because business are going to be looking to local enterprise partnerships and saying, okay, how do we engage with these new initiatives that have been established? How do we take apprenticeships on? How do we access the cash to employ young people? And if you guys aren't being supported in offering that guidance and advice, I'm not quite sure where we're going to go.
Well, I think people listening in this should be reassured that we not only are up for that challenge going forward, we have a long history of what's happened since our LEPs were created back in 2010-11 of delivery. And if I just personalise it for Leeds City Region, if I look at our growth service over the last 5 years, it's deployed about 100 million of taxpayers' money and about 4 times that amount of the private sector. So $500 million invested in SMEs pre-COVID. So there is a history of delivery. I think the important point which Steve makes and Claire makes is that actually what we've done is not that we are ready to earn our spurs. We've earned our spurs many times over, a number of us, and we've shown that we actually are collaborators and coordinators and bring together something that's cohesive, that's economically, socially and environmentally appropriate. As I mentioned in my earlier remarks about that equilateral triangle, just to give a picture. I think what COVID has exposed, amongst other things, is some of the weaknesses and fractures in our economic footprint nationally as well as in the north. But also, and I would say this, the challenge is not just about how we do as local enterprise partnerships, but actually how does Whitehall sort itself out and work across Whitehall? Steve talks about supply chains in manufacturing. Yet one of my hobby horses, one of the critical supply chains for business is skills and people and their abilities. Where is the supply chain linked up from 4 to 21 in education? No, it's fragmented into bits and pieces. Even the devolution that some of us are close to embarking upon, it's about bits of the education budget that you can have control of, or while we control all of it. I think, in fairness to people locally, we've shown we can deliver. We've earned the trust. It's not about establishing trust. The challenge is, can we do it at a higher level and higher scale? And I'm personally confident, certainly with my 10 colleagues that make up, and myself that make up MB11, we are confident. But the one thing we're not is complacent about the size and scale of the challenge. And we are putting into government individually, and I'm trying to make sure they see the prize for the nation, a series of offers. It's not just a shopping list of asks, but what will you get for that money, Mr. and Mrs. Taxpayer? What will we do where actually putting £1 with us is better spent than putting £1 somewhere else, recognising the scarcity of it? If I may take a few moments, at a northern level, we see the whole innovation space as an opportunity for genuine levelling up. Give people with ideas the opportunity to test whether they might be business propositions, whether they could be scaled to globally significant businesses. Secondly, with an eye on Brexit, the North is undeveloped when it comes to exports, inward investment. We've done a lot in the last 5 years, but there's more to be done. And we've got to remember, when it comes to trade, the North put the great in Great Britain, and we'll do it again, and we are ready to do it again. Thirdly, and importantly, we shouldn't lose sight of our preeminence when it comes to clean technologies and the environmental solutions. I was surprised to learn, because I happened to be looking at some of the plans to reduce carbon emissions in my own geography, that when it comes to sustainable aviation fuels, actually the UK is at the front of the technology. It's the front of the testing. Well, hang on a minute. This is a globally significant opportunity. So it's how do we, on the one hand, rescue as much as we can, to Steve's point and Claire's point, not have a tsunami of young men and women and other people at the other end of the age scale just with nowhere to go, on the one hand. On the other hand, build back for the future. I hate this build back better, because it sounds like what we had was crap, and it wasn't crap. It just had disconnects in it. How do we build back, and so that when generations come after us and say, do you know what, that lot did a bloody good job in all the circumstances. And I am very clear, and I hope my colleagues from NP11 that are on the call and any listening, very clear, the North is a real critical part of the national solution. And I'm pleased to say my involvement with senior cabinet level ministers on behalf of the 11 of us suggest they agree. So it's up to us to seize the moment, not to squeeze other places out, but to play our part. But once furlough unwinds, the thought of the 2 out of every 10 people in the North might not be in employment in the very near future. It doesn't necessarily keep me awake at night, but causes me to worry. And so we need some big interventions. But as I say, and I'm sorry to labour the point, but I feel very strongly, and particularly as Vice Chair of the LEP Network nationally, this isn't about LEPs demonstrating what we could do. We've done that in spades. In spades have we deployed public money, billions of it, and delivered jobs, delivered growth, delivered green solutions. The challenge is, can we do it at a further level of scale? The answer is yes, given the resources, and that's people and pounds, but also powers. And that's where devolution comes in, and we need it everywhere yesterday, subject, of course, to local people feeling that's the right way for them. And on that subject, I think it's important that let's play a key part with our local authority partners and Metro mayors in explaining why devolution is a good thing, not just some sort of bureaucratic mechanism, but actually how, me taking it random, how in Huddersfield, for Mr. and Mrs. Bloggins, it's going to be better for them, their family and their community, rather than some sort of strange ethereal connect. A construct, because otherwise, why would anybody vote for something they can't say, actually, that's going to be useful for me, that's going to be helpful for my kids, that might be nice for my grandkids. And I feel somewhat strongly, and maybe it's overly evangelical about it, Frank, but I do feel we've got to sell the vision. And I think, with great respect to the people at the centre, I'm not sure they have yet come to a view of what that vision is. And that's not a criticism. Some of us are up for helping shape that, not the mechanics of it, not the tail, but about the dog, because the tail should deliver the outcome rather than just be the mechanic. So what? I don't want tail wagging dog. We want economic, social, and environmental successful dog with the appropriate infrastructure tail, so to speak.
Some great points again, Roger, and some crucial things that you've talked about there. And I want to come to Claire about 2 in particular. One is this ability to collaborate, because, I'm conscious of the disparate geographies that you guys cover. and therefore you have your own skill sets in order to be able to pull people into conversations and those partnerships and collaborations moving forward. And I'm guessing that's been a challenge in Cheshire and Warrington, Clare, but one you've overcome. Perhaps there are lessons that Whitehall can learn from some of this local and regional activity that you can take in the north. The other point that Roger made, though, and I think this is going to be absolutely essential and crucial moving forward, innovation. Yeah. That's where we, and I think we are well placed as a northern economy, really start to make a difference. Again, Claire, I would suggest Cheshire and Warrington will be looking forward to that channel. We've got so much to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if I can take the first point, so as usual, Roger's very clear, which is really helpful. And I think he's a real advocate for the North, which is particularly helpful. But one of the key pieces that he highlights is that need to collaborate. And in Cheshire and Warrington, we've been talking very focused on that powerful partnership between the public, the private and the voluntary sector to make sure that we can deliver, a healthy, sustainable and inclusive, better future. And it is about creating something which is ahead. But that collaboration across the NP11 region is critical, and we've been working really hard together to make sure that we highlighted some of our core areas where we know that the sum will be greater, and that's really important. So innovation is one of the elements that you've just mentioned, and we can be doing and are doing some very innovative things in Cheshire and Warrington. We've got the opportunity to build on our life science assets. We've also been implementing a number of projects around, for example, our advanced manufacturing training centre. We're putting in place a digital construction programme. We've actually invested over the last few months 8.9 million, where we're hoping that 50,000 learners should benefit from that. We're also looking at creating new jobs, which are all around making sure that we are digital and we're innovative. But we can do that at a northern level by building on making sure we have a picture for what we can deliver across the north. And then there will be specific things that we need to be doing in each one of our regions. So as Steve mentioned earlier, aerospace and tourism is critical there. Actually also very critical in Cheshire and Warrington. How do we therefore make sure that we're connecting in the right places to make sure that we are connected? The other key thing I think that is important to make sure that we're building on the assets we have here is transport. It is critical that we work together to make sure that we have our transport both north to south and east to west to make the most of the assets we have in our region. And that is something, again, that we need to be collaborating on in a northern region, but also taking that down into our regions, because we know where some of the, the nubs or the little hub spots would be to make sure that we can make that as effective as possible. So collaboration is absolutely crucial at this time. And if you look actually across any of the sectors, particularly in the life sciences sector, and as we've seen with the COVID vaccine, for example, actually there's a huge amount of collaboration going on. And a lot of people have actually taken their barriers down and are, not holding on to data and information. They are sharing, and we have become a lot more open. And I really hope that we continue to do that, because I think we have a massive opportunity. And the North, in terms of the life sciences sector, for example, but also aerospace and car manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, has a huge amount to offer in terms of that innovation. But we can also be world leading in a number of these elements, which I think sometimes we don't shout about enough. And we need to be shouting about the elements. So for example, Jodrell Bank, it's a World Heritage, it's a science World Heritage site, which is incredible. And we need to be shouting about those assets that we have in the North. And just if you don't mind, if I can just pick up, Frank, on something that you said earlier about delivery and the important role that the LEPs play in making sure that we deliver. One of the critical roles that we play, and I build on Roger's 2 C's actually, of connections and collaboration, is also we play a catalyst role. And that catalytic role is going to be really important because it's about pace. And I think one of the things that as the business voice we can start to do is make sure that we're upping the pace, because we can't take too long. We need to make sure that we are grabbing hold of what some are going to have to see as an opportunity to innovate and make sure we're ahead. But the time is right this moment, and we need to be really clear about it. So I'd add the catalytic role that we play in that as well, to make sure that we are delivering on the ground.
Some great points again, Claire. I want to go back to the marketing and messaging, and also the point you've just made about pace, and perhaps we can come back to that a little later in the conversation. But Steve, just sticking with this idea of collaboration, you and I had a conversation not so long ago. It's been much frustration to me and others in Lancashire that collaboration perhaps hasn't been as powerful, as good as it could have been. But we appear to be moving in the right direction now. And as somebody once said, you know, never waste the opportunity that good crises bring. If Lancashire and our political leaders, and it usually is the political leaders where we have this sort of difficulty and challenge, they can't see the sense of needing to collaborate now, they're never going to see it. So I think let's take the positive out of the challenge. But the other thing, again, this opportunity of innovation, Lancashire can be at the forefront of some of those discussions, can't it?
Yeah, you're absolutely dead right. I think Lancashire's got a real opportunity now to come together and collaborate and deliver a future, is the way I would describe it. And it's not going to be easy, Frank. You were part of that for many, many years. And, you know, cultures built into the county, and difficult to break out of it. That said, I have seen the sparks of light at the end of the tunnel. You know, I can see the political leaders at least saying, yes, combined authority, it makes sense. A devolution deal, yes, it makes sense. Where they will differ will be the structures that sit below it. So the political structures, and you'll know that better than most people. So I think what we've got to do is stay optimistic, try and support that process as much as possible, and make sure that they understand what business needs, what business wants, and what that strong business voice is. And I go back to Roger's point on collaboration and Claire's point. You know, that is so important if we're ever going to succeed at anything. No one succeeds on their own in life. You know, you succeed by collaborating with others. And that's, you see, the most successful organisations, they've got that culture at the heart of it. Now, we need that across Lancashire. We need it across the north. And it's great to see at an MP11 point of view how we can all sit in a room. And I can tell you, we don't always agree. You know, we have very frank conversations, chaired well by Roger, and you know, but we get to a decision, and then when we've got there, we go off and do it. And I would say that's the strength of business. That's what businesses do. Now we need that across the whole political environment too, where they can come together with a purpose, say this is what we're going to do, and then go off and make that happen. And you know, one other point I would make is, I hate the term, but it's ringing in my ears greatly. Governments have constantly said, follow the science. So we will listen to the science of health, etc., and we'll make our decisions. And I would say, follow the science with business. You know, talk to businesses, understand the business strategy that we require, understand the inputs required from government to make the economy grow and recover itself. And that's the science. You know, business and running businesses is technically a science, I would say. And, you know, it's very hard to imagine if you're sat on the ground chasing orders every day, some every hour to stay afloat and grow. If you're in a political world, things don't happen at that pace. So I think Claire's right, connecting the two up. And the only final point I would make is, it's very important. In business, we talk about know when to lead and know when to follow, okay? And it's very important you do that, because if you're not the right person to lead through a certain phase, don't do it, because it will end in disaster. And I would strongly believe that if you take a look at the economic challenges we face across the north, if you don't bring groups like LEPS, if you don't bring NP11 to the fore and listen to them, take action from what they say, follow the science, we'll make the wrong decisions, Frank. Now, I'm seeing shoots of this emerging, but what I've learned in the last 12 months is you can often go 2 steps forward, 5 steps back. And we've got to find a way to, get to base 1, get to base 2, get to base 3, and not fall back. And that's the approach we've got to take. Now, that's normal for business. It's not necessarily normal in the public sector. But, you've got to be optimistic and hope we can get everybody there. And devolution, a combined authority for Lancashire, frankly, I'm not too worried about what the structures are that sit below it, because that's just organisation, right? And a lot of the time in my business life, if anyone came to me and said the solution is change the organisation, I generally ask them to leave. It's about behaviours, it's about culture, it's about inclusion, it's about collaboration, it's about innovation. And you've heard all those 3 points come out of my colleagues, and I can't stress the importance of that.
And if I can move into the sort of messaging and marketing, two points here. Again, Claire made, I think, the remark about us not necessarily shouting loud enough about what the North has to offer. And Roger, you said something to me a few weeks ago on the call that we had that I've used lots of occasions since. You said the North needs to start to be seen as part of the solution rather than a problem that needs to be sorted out. And again, if you look at some of the way in which government have come up with initiatives, and European Union as well are guilty of this, it's almost a race to the bottom, isn't it? You've got to demonstrate how poor you are. You've got to demonstrate how much deprivation you've got in the area. And I think it is important to turn that dial. And some of the things you were saying earlier in the call, absolutely right. We've got some of the solutions to these big problems. We've got to get that message across. So, from a Northern Powerhouse perspective, I want to hear your views on that. The other part of this, though, and I want everybody to comment on, is I'm starting to get sick and bloody tired of waking up every morning to headlines that are basically saying to people, we're going to hell in a handcart. So the latest one this morning, and I've come off a call with Manchester business leaders where I've had a bit of a spat. My accent in that forum doesn't always help, by the way.
I know how you feel.
Yeah, but somebody said, on the call, we're going to have 120,000 deaths going through to January. That's the latest report from the scientists. Now, of course, the report doesn't say that. The report says if the government did absolutely nothing, and if we'd done absolutely nothing up until this point, then potentially there could be 120,000 deaths. Point I'm trying to make here, Roger, is I think as businesses now and business leaders, we have a responsibility to start actually encouraging people to get back to work, get back into offices, get back into our cities. Because I tell you what, if the economy flatlines beyond January, we're going to see an awful lot more health damage through economic crash than the coronavirus could ever have caused if we're not careful. I'll get off my soapbox now, Roger, and let you come in. Sorry.
Let me get back on mine, eh? Can I just, to deal with your questions, can I just reflect back? I think the important thing, and this does come into our messaging, first of all, in the land of LEPS, the North, NP11 is almost a third of the whole English landscape in aggregate, in number terms. We also represent a huge piece of the economy as well as the landmass of England. When I think about the aggregate experience of my 10 fellow chairs, and I look at that, And I said this to the Secretary of State for Transport, who's obviously the Northern Powerhouse Minister around the cabinet table. I said, do you realise that you've got probably half a millennia of man and woman years experience across every sector you can imagine globally, on your doorstep, freely available, ready to go. And I would say, Secretary of State, use it, don't abuse it. And he was very clear. He said, I recognise that, and I recognise that you are collaborators. But we also have to remember that it isn't just about meaningful collaboration. We've got to recognise there is also healthy competition, but that they should be bedfellows, not either or. And that's the esprit de corps we're trying to develop. And going back to my point about the North being the solution, not the problem, that's within our control, because we have described ourselves as them over there, or we've lost out, or them down south have had more. That's sterile, that's history. We've got to use, you've got to use the words, in my mind, of George Bernard Shaw, when he said, we're not made wise by the recollection of our past, but by the responsibility for our future. And when I say our future, I don't mean us on this call or people of my generation, but for generations to come. So I think it is important that we describe the offer we make. And it comes back to the manifesto that we published just before the last general election, which I know seems like a long time ago, but in weeks and months terms, not so long, where we set out a compelling narrative, which was supported by all the Metro Mayors, by the Convention of the North, about what the North was up to do, and what it was up to do within 2 decades, and it should be no different now, it's just a bigger challenge, up to do was to become self-sufficient economically, not relying on success elsewhere to maintain our underperformance, our deprivation and our poverty, but actually, as the Victorians did, see economic growth as the driver for social transformation, that we do everything in our power to eradicate fuel poverty, deprivation, and all the other things by extraordinary, that becomes the new ordinary, economic success. But I think that's where it's the heart of our challenge, is that reimagining of the economic success that we want going forward, rather than just trying to build back what we had. It's not build back better, it's retain what we had, but actually
and a better
build
future.
something new. And I am the first one to be a pragmatist. You know, of course, you could do the Dad's Army, we're all doomed and let's give up. That's not the British spirit. That's not the Northern grit. Certainly, if that's what people want, well, I'll go off and maybe do something I've never imagined I would do. I'll reimagine myself as learning how to play golf, which I would probably drive me spare, but I know other people would enjoy it. So I think our message has got through. You know, the politicians use the manifesto. They, in fairness, we've recently all received allocations from the Getting Building Fund of £900 million. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that 40% of that total pot that was allocated for England has been allocated to the North. That gives me a bit of a sign and a reason for confidence. And I will be saying to anybody that's in number 11, whenever you're thinking about doling out the money, at least, remember, at least 40% is coming north, at least, not just topped. So just as a rather silly metric, but I think it's important. We also turn it round and say, right, so what are we going to do? How, as I've said, and I repeated this, how in Cheshire and Warrington, how in Lancashire, how in Leeds City region, in terms of where we've got our economic strengths, my part of the world, health technologies, health tech, but 3 parts: devices, innovations, data is where we have strength. So let's build on that. Now, how does that work in Cheshire and Warrington in life sciences? How do we put that together and forget the administrative boundaries? I think the other thing as well is, I'm a great believer that form follows function. And I think we need to come and say, so what is it we want to deliver? And let's make sure the structures are there to enable that, not become strictures to suboptimal and deliver suboptimal performance. I don't think we have that luxury anymore because of COVID to date. And so I'm keen and people are getting all excited about they're going to move bits of government from London to York or here, there, everywhere. Kind of, so bloody what, frankly. Actually, by moving the House of Lords to York, for example, it'll mean this, this, and this for the economy of the country. That's the prize, not, oh, we've just moved the deck chairs around on the proverbial economic Titanic, because that's kind of not where we're at. And as I said, and I've now occupied your soapbox, I think, Frank, I've said is that we are ready, and we've got the top-down whole is greater than some of the parts, and the bottom-up. And I think together with others around the country, if you don't use what you've got on offer, then it's a dereliction of duty, with great respect to those elected to the highest offices of our land.
Thanks, Roger. Claire, can I ask you about where you see our messaging at a national level at the moment, and the impact obviously this has on our local economies? So am I alone in thinking that we actually need to turn the dial and start to be a bit more optimistic and positive in terms of that messaging?
Absolute believer in the power of purpose, and what people really need at this moment in time in everything is clarity. Clarity of where we are going and what are we going to get behind at a UK level. We've had really, a lot of mixed messages. I mean, even whether you're wearing a face mask or not wearing a face mask this morning, in other countries been much, much clearer. And I think that clarity is something that we need at both the UK level and, as we said earlier, at a northern and a regional level. But that positioning, I think, is important. Going back to the point that you made earlier, Frank, around, are we going to the lowest common denominator? Actually, when you look at the businesses that are going to be surviving this period and flourishing through this period, it's about quality to a large degree. And it's going to be those that have demonstrated that resilience and have pivoted, changed, reimagined, whatever the language you want to use, to ensure that they're still focused on delivering something that either the customer needs and wants, or doesn't know that they need or want. And I was encouraged actually by the education sector talking about how we should rethink the way that further education is working. And what we've done in Cheshire and Warrington is we've created something called Accelerate. And that is very much about taking the employer's view of what are the jobs going to look like in the future. So we can have a confident picture of the future. What is it that we're going to need to be focusing on? We need to make sure that we're enhancing our capability and knowledge around our digital, understanding what does that actually mean, and how does that translate into my work environment. So Accelerate is something which I'm really, really very positive about, that we can deliver it in Cheshire and Warrington. There's no reason why we can't do that at a northern level as well, which is employer-led skills development, which is all about the future and the future-focused approach, so that we don't do that going to the lowest common denominator. In the UK, we have to step up, and we need to be confident to make sure that we are skilling up our talent. We can have 133,000 jobs, for example, in life sciences in the UK over the next few years. Have we geared up our education system to make sure that we can deliver that talent within the UK? Or are we going to go beyond our shores? Are we going to bring talent in? How clear are we on our approach to that? And I think it's really critical that we build a very positive message, but we have absolute clarity about where we're going, followed by then translating some of that. Go back to the point you just made, you're going to have 120,000 deaths. Something that we have to keep on doing as business people is translating and making sure we've understood data. And how are we translating that? What does it actually mean? And therefore, what are we going to do about it? And I think sometimes we just see the headlines. And I think in some ways our media could help us actually build a more positive future for the UK. And that's something we need to be thinking about. And the other piece is then we need to empathise. We need to empathise with those businesses and understand the situation they're in, and how can we enable them to be in a better place, whether it is about collaboration, whether it's about innovation, whether it's about funding, whether it is actually about skills. And for some, it's going to be about making sure that they can step forward with the right talented, skilled people in place. So, yeah, I think we need more clarity, and that would be a key message for me.
I think the point that you make about education and training is totally right as well. And listen, I've been talking about getting that particular issue solved for 30 years now. And, you know, if we're not going to solve it now, we never will, because it really does need to be genuine partnerships between private sector and those educational institutions.
Absolutely.
I would actually go further, Claire, and suggest that actually private sector need to get more involved in those training.
And actually, Frank, if you don't mind if I come back in on that, because actually within Cheshire Warrington, we've created something called the Pledge, and that is about the private sector and businesses taking a lead and engaging, and that has worked exceptionally well. And you know, thrilled with how much engagement we've had. So we ran a virtual careers festival a few weeks ago, and we had 70 employers at that. We had 200,000 children and young people engaged. Amazing numbers, incredible. So, you know, there is the desire, and everybody recognises the need to step up. And I think we can all step up into that place, but we have to enable that. We have to support businesses to do that.
Thanks, Claire. Steve, I'm conscious that we're running out of time, and we've got a couple of questions from panelists who are watching this session today. I'll ask Roger to address Stephen Young from Lancashire County Council's point about the future of LEPs, which is in the chat room there. But Steve, Richard Shaw is asking, what does a realistic measure of success look like in 6 months? And then in 2 years, how can businesses in the region support this journey? I suppose, you know, it was a point I made earlier, wasn't it? We're doing things at the moment that feel very immediate, short term. What are the sort of step changes you think we're going to need to make if we're going to see in 2 years' time an economy returning to some sort of robust health?
Yeah, it's a great question, actually. I think a lot of the time we live in the world of tactical input, and what we really need is a vision. You know, we need a vision for the north, we need a vision for the counties and the local areas. And that can be slightly different, but all moving in the same direction. And I think what's really important to me is that we can come together and create that vision. I used to lead some sessions called Imagine. And, you know, you'd start off with trying to imagine what could it be like in 2 or 3 or 5 years' time? And can we just draw that picture? And having that then, okay, if that's what we believe is great, if that's what we want, what's the route map now to that, however difficult and challenging that may be. So for me, success in 6 months' time is that we are, well, bottom line is we've got a vaccine, we've got treatments that can help us solve this problem. We've started to reimagine new norms and kept the ones that are really important and make a difference, and drop the ones that are restrictive or prohibitive to success. I think also we've got to, I mean, both my colleagues here have talked about young people. We've got to remember that they are the future, really. And I think the more we engage with young people on what they need, what their futures could be, and help in the deprived areas, some of our deprived populations, imagine a new outcome for themselves. It doesn't have to be what their parents or grandparents did. It can be different, and therefore create ambition and purpose. Put the education links very strongly back into business, such that we can see the skills being developed are what we need for business to be successful. And I would love us to see that within the next 12 months' time, that we've created a systems approach to how we operate in these areas, so that we know that if we pull this lever, it's not remote, it's not in a different room, and we're just doing stuff in that world. We're pulling this lever, and it has this ultimate outcome at the end of the day. And I think that's the approach we've got to take, Frank. If we just take this in independent, departmental, unconnected strategies and approaches, we will fail. So the bit I like about the MP11 and the way we can collaborate is that we start to think in that way now. You know, the conversations we're having are actually quite refreshing. And, I'd encourage Roger maybe occasionally to invite someone in to just come and watch, and take part. Not part of MP11, just come and invite people to come and see it. Invite young people, come and sit in the room. That's what we're trying to do in Lancashire. I just think we will get through this, we will get over it. Let's put some positive things in place. But we need a vision, Frank, and we need a vision that everybody can buy into. And everybody can look at it and go, do you know what? That fits me and I've got a role to play.
As it happens on these occasions, just as we're coming to the end of the session, people start typing the questions in. If we don't come to you, I do apologise, but I think some of the points that are being made in the chat room have been covered by our speakers this morning anyway. But I do want to turn to this point that Stephen Young from Lancashire County Council's made. Roger, with the government looking to increase the number of combined authorities as part of their autumn white paper, in addition to plans for regional growth bodies and the place marketing responsibility already with local authorities, what do you think this crowded landscape means for the future of LEPs? And I do think that's an important point, because I know, Roger, the one thing that you're about, having got to know you over a number of years now, is action. And you want to be at the centre of these things. You want to be really involved in the delivery. So future of LEPs as combined authorities and these other plans start to emerge.
A really good question. So thank you, Stephen, for it. And I'll speak, I guess, from my own experience of being part of a combined authority, but not yet a mayoral one. Hopefully that's any time soon in the spring of next year. But and also somebody who's now in his 8th year as the chair of Leeds City Region LEP, and 3rd year as chair of MP11. So I guess I've got some experience to draw upon. But actually, what's clear to me, and it's back to Steve and Claire's point and my own point about when there's a common vision of the future, economically, socially, environmentally, you get the best of the private sector, you get the best of the public sector. But separately, each can do things well, but together we can do things that look extraordinary, that become a new high-level ordinary. And I think this is where LEPs have proven their worth on relatively modest operational resources to deploy significant amounts of public sector funding. If I think of my own geography, I set a vision back in 2014. I call it my 1 + 4 = 10 vision, where £1 from the taxpayer, 4 from the private sector, invested in the right things, you get double your money in terms of economic uplift. The actual leverage over a range of projects is more likely 1 + 8 = something bigger. And that's the sort of mindset that we bring in partnership. If I think about my own journey as a member of a combined authority, so I'm not a politician, I'm not an officer, but I sit as a peer with those elected to deliver on the economic and social transformation. As somebody that's the deputy chair of the investment committee, the business voice to these investments is in the mix to say, is that the right thing? Are we really future-proofing FE by doing that project today? Will it be just as good in 10 or more? So I think there's a place for LEPs. And I think when it comes to pan-regional bodies, working with those elected either at Metro Mayor level or local authority level, LEPs and NP11 for the North in particular should be part of that geography. We should be part of that structure to make sure that all of the economy has a common view of the future, and we get on there and deliver it. And I'm a great one for my quotes, and I think of great men that have influenced my thinking. One I never met, I wish I had. Abraham Lincoln said the best way to predict the future is to create it, and that's what we're about. And the man I did meet a lot and influenced me massively growing up in the Northeast was my late dad, who always said, Roger, always remember, if you don't know where you're going, you have no right to be disappointed where you end up. And I think it's clear we as NP11 know where we want to go with the North, working with the mayors, working with everybody else across the sectors. And I invite others, perhaps more powerful than any of us would ever hope to be, to perhaps adopt something of where do we want the UK to be in 2030? Where do we want it to be in 2040? And put in place the milestones to get us there. And again, without sounding like a struck record, I believe, and I look to my colleagues on the screens, I believe NP11 has a fundamental and pivotal role to play in this because of the convening and collaborating and non-political approach we take to economic, social and environmental transformation.
Roger, on that note, I will end what has been a fascinating session. Thank you very much for your contributions. It's been a fitting 100th Zoom webinar for Downtown in Business.
Happy 100.
Yeah, happy 100. You're looking good on it, Frank. You're looking good.
I have to say, I think I'm hoping that it's going to take us a lot longer to get to 200 because I'm delighted that in August we're going to start to host some live events again, and that can't come soon enough. They will be very safe to attend. It will be invite-only events, but for those who are watching, please look out for the details. We've got a couple of great events to look forward to in August, live events. We'll be continuing to do some of these Zoom chats as well. As I say, listen, Steve, Claire, Roger, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for your thoughts this morning. Hopefully, we'll see you at a live event very soon. Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Well, Frank, if I could say thank you to my colleagues too for joining me.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.